Two things are really interesting to me yesterday.
Yeah.
And I know the Matt Harvey thing is on the front burner, and it should be. And it's not like we didn't know that there was something going on, and the Mets didn't know there was something going on. Nobody wants to pry into anybody's personal life. But unfortunately, when it does affect your ability to do your job and be the guy that you're supposed to be, somebody should have done something more than they did for the Mets.
I know. It is easy to say that. And you always want to think that if you were in that situation as a person who was in power in that Mets organization, that you would have done more. But I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough when you're talking about a guy's personal life. It's accusatory. I don't know. It's hard. I wasn't there while it was going on. His performance was so good for so long before it wasn't. Of course, it's just tough. It's tough to say. It's tough to criticize people in those situations because.
No, it's not. I mean,
it is though because
he kind of got caught up in the nightlife and the partying.
I know, but do you go right up to somebody and you're like, you doing coke, and then what does he say? No, you can't test them. Okay, then fine.
The thing about it is they all should be tested.
Right. Okay, but they weren't at that time.
I understand that.
I don't know. I didn't like a lot of the criticism yesterday. Like it was, because this is what happens all the time in these stories. Is like, okay, Matt Harvey got caught up in the New York City nightlife and the partying and all of that. Tyler Skaggs, the reason that we're learning about this is because Tyler Skaggs unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. But now all of a sudden, the lynch mob is going after the Mets and Terry Collins and everybody that's in the Mets. You should have known. You should have stopped this. You should have done this. We always lose sight of what reality is in these things. And it's like now Terry Collins is some sort of scapegoat that needs to be roasted like a pig yesterday because he didn't do enough because Matt Harvey was a 20-something-year-old superstar in New York who liked to party. No, that doesn't fly with me. I'm sorry. Like I don't like how we do that. It's always like to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy. And I honestly I feel bad for Matt Harvey. I'm sure that he is miserable thinking about that time and wishes that it had gone differently. And I just don't want to go back and do this revisionist history and just trash everybody that should have stopped him. The guy made some bad decisions. And luckily, he still has his life, unlike Tyler Skaggs. And I think that's the thing we need to focus on more is the fact that the Mets fans are like, oh, man, he could have been greater. He could have been this, Doc and Darryl, whatever. I mean, you see how badly it can go for some guys like Tyler Skaggs. I mean, this is real life. This isn't just about bringing us happiness as baseball fans. This is real life struggles, real life issues that he had. And, I wish he had gotten more help. And you know what? To be honest with you, probably because he was so good at that time is the reason why people didn't press him on it. And then when things started going a different way, he had already established himself as a superstar. But performance has a lot to do with it. Same with Doc and Darryl and other guys in the 80s that were doing coke. It's like, these guys are so good and they get so larger than life. It's almost like they become untouchable. But anyway, that was my take yesterday. It's like everybody's gonna go back and roast Terry Collins now, like it's his fault.
No, it's not Terry Collins' fault. It's certainly not Sandy Alderson's fault. It's certainly not Omar Manaya's fault. It's not Jeff Wilpon's fault. Because if we were going to go down that road and basically blame those guys or say they should have done more, we could say the same thing about Billy Epler, who is the current general manager of the Mets, about Tyler Skaggs, because he was the general manager of the Angels when this guy died.
Yeah.
Now look, you make decisions, and Tyler Skaggs decided to, use a concoction of drugs. And he ends up killing, himself.
Yeah.
And this is why all this stuff is coming to light, because Eric Kay, who is also on, the payroll for the Angels in the front office in some way, whether a PR guy, whatever, trainer, whatever, was the guy that was actually getting the drugs and giving it to the players. And, and of course, Matt Harvey is saying he was using Percocet, and Percocet, obviously a pain pill, and maybe that's what he felt like he needed every time he went out on the mound, just to be able to get through 5 innings.
Which is very common for those who have surgeries and stuff afterwards. It's like you're hooked on it, and then you can't function without it.
And by the way, I mean, these players, because of what is at the end of the rainbow, there's a very large pot of gold that they can get there, will do anything they possibly can to keep themselves on the field.
Yeah.
And I've said it 1,000 times in this show that we as players, were always our worst enemy. Whether it be Toradol or whether it be some sort of painkiller or shot or something like that back in the 80s, in the 70s, and the 60s.
Sure.
It wasn't regulated nearly like it is today.
Yeah.
And and the other thing too is I understand that the unions have to fight for the right of the players and all this stuff. I mean, for everybody concerned. And I think that there is a much better understanding of the abuse of these pain medications. But for everybody's, I think, benefit, there should be testing for illicit drugs like cocaine. And you got to watch people, and the trainers have got to watch people, and the front office have got to watch the underlings that are dealing with the players. Remember, these players, mainly like the PR guys and the equipment guys and the trainers, they get big money tips at the end of the year.
Oh, sure.
So
and how do you get tips? You keep people happy. You give them what they want.
I'll tell you what. If I were a head coach, this is just me, but if I were a head coach, I would have a meeting with different meetings, not all together. I'd have a meeting with my training staff. I'd have a meeting with my equipment staff. I'd have a meeting with my PR staff. And I would sit there and say, listen to me. You work for this organization, which essentially means that I'm your boss. I'm responsible for your actions.
Right.
And you guys interact with the players every single day. I need to know anything that may be going awry with any of these players at any time. And if any player ever asks you to do something that is, immoral or in any way, shape, or form, could lead to something like what happened with Matt Harvey, I need to know. And don't think the Mets weren't trailing Matt Harvey or watching Matt Harvey or hearing whispers about Matt Harvey, whether it be in Soho or Tribeca or the meatpacking district or the West Village at, 3 o'clock in the morning, stumbling drunk coming out of a bar, missing a team plane or a meeting. I mean, all the signs were there. I mean, they're all there. Yeah. So I just think if I were the manager or if I were the head coach, I'd be like, hey, you guys work for me. I need to know what's going on. I don't really need narcs. I don't want that. What I do want, though, is an understanding that there could be a problem. And I don't know what that problem is. Sometimes it could be illicit drug use. Sometimes it could be pain medication. Sometimes it could be an alcohol situation. It could be a gambling situation. It could be all sorts of different things that these guys are going through. And yeah, I do have sympathy for, you read what Doc Gooden said about all this and everything. And I feel bad for Doc, but ultimately, he put himself in that situation.
Sure.
And he has to bear the brunt of the problems that come along with it after the fact.
Yeah, it's a difficult. You're right. It's a difficult discussion, and I am empathetic to the disease of addiction. There's no way around that. I've learned a lot about it. I've talked to a lot of people who have dealt with it. There's been people in my life who have dealt with it to extreme cases. But there's also a point, too, where, you see some of these intervention shows or, where it comes down to, the enablers have to stop doing what they're doing, and then it's up to the individual to make the choice. There comes that time. And unfortunately for Doc, it was too much. And, he bounced back and had a good end of his career, but then it started up again. After his post-playing career, he was arrested with cocaine as recently as 2019. But it's a sad. The whole thing is sad, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't be blamed or people should just be like hands off of Matt Harvey and he shouldn't be criticized. That's not what I'm saying. It's just the reaction is never satisfactory to me, and I shouldn't really care what everybody else's reaction is. But it was bothering me yesterday. Like, all of this is coming out because there's a trial because a guy died because his life got so out of control with his drug abuse.
Yeah, because nobody did anything about it.
Right. But
that easily could have been Matt Harvey.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and instead of going back oh, Matt Harvey could have been so good or oh this or oh that, Matt Harvey's alive at least. And Matt Harvey's dealing with this. And he's talking about this openly. I'm thinking about him.
Well, the only reason he's talking about it openly
because he has to. Yeah, I know.
Because he was put on trial.
I know, but but he's still doing it, and he's still having to deal with everybody like us talking about it, about the time of his life. And the reaction is essentially the same, which is, you blew it. You had everything at your fingertips, and you blew it because you wanted to party, and that's not got to be a fun thing to be dealing with the rest of your life.
You remember from 2012 to 2015, he was front and center. He was the biggest thing in the in sports here in New York. He was the man. He had his moment, and he's from here. So it was a great story.
Yeah.
It really was. And then all of a sudden, the injuries started happening, and the partying was going on, and he basically cratered his own career because of his off the field actions.
Yeah.
And sometimes guys use cocaine because it's a fun drug to stay up at night and keep it going, and you lose your inhibitions and you have some fun. Well, wasn't he dating a model or something along the line?
Was it Adriana Lima? Was that who it was?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So you know the nightlife that they're involved in.
Sure.
I mean, and it's just so destructive. And here's a young kid that's got all this ability, and he could have been Jacob deGrom. He could have been Tom Seaver. He could have been a real pro if he wanted to be, but he felt the trappings of the off the field situations was just too much for him.
Yeah. No.
Hey, it's bad. It's not like I was surprised. I'm not surprised about any of it.
No, not at all. I mean, and that shouldn't really be the discussion. Not like, are you surprised that Matt Harvey got himself involved in cocaine while he was partying in the city? That's not really, what it is this morning. But I don't know. I was just thinking about him yesterday having to sit there and talking about this, and then thinking about what it's like, if you are somebody who had that opportunity, was as good as he was, and then made those types of decisions that he did, and now has to live with it for the rest of his life. Now, I guess Terry Collins mentioned, he said something along the lines of, I should just kill myself or whatever it was.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the paranoia part of it. So
just some dark stuff, man. I mean, it's heavy, dark stuff.
Yeah, it's the paranoia of using the drug.
Yeah.
I mean, you come back, you think everybody's after you. You think, you should end your life, and you start doing things that, obviously aren't all that structured, if you will.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I'm not trying to be hard ass here or anything else like that, but it all comes along with it. Oh yeah, I try to kill myself. Yeah, because you're on drugs and you're not living up to what you think you should be living up to, because there's so much pressure on you. There's so much anxiety. You got an arm problem. You got a rib problem. You got all sorts of injuries. You need Percocet to pitch. I mean, think about that. And you want the big money. You want to get to that. You want to get to that huge contract that's sitting out there if you can get there. But because of the service time situation, and because of the system that you play in, you have to get through all of these years some way, somehow, to be able to come out the other end of it, to be able to make the money that the big money guys are making in Major League Baseball.
Sure. I mean, it's very, very easy to slip into that side of things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what makes guys who don't, like Jacob deGrom, even more impressive.
And by the way, just so you know, I mean, starting pitchers have a very boring life.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It is, people have no idea just how boring it is. They go to the stadium, they work out, they do their thing, they do their running, whatever their requirements are through their coaching staff and all that other stuff, to go through some throwing. But then it's like, the Atlanta Braves pitchers, they were always known for, like, when they came into town, they were going right to play golf. They have so much free time on their hands. And the trappings of falling into not being able to manage that free time and doing things that Matt Harvey was doing. And I wouldn't be surprised a few other pitchers on that staff were doing the same thing.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.